Welcome to AAU Teen Talk TV. You're watching Conversations with Verdel Jones, and I'm your host, Verdel Jones. This show is dedicated to providing you with concrete, relevant, timely information, educating you on what matters. Today we have a great show. We're going to be talking about the school-to-prison pipeline. Oftentimes you might hear that expression but not fully understand the grasp of it and what it actually means. So we have two great guests here this afternoon to kind of discuss that topic. So remember, in the words of Maya Angelou, when you learn, teach, and when you get, give. Welcome to Conversations with Verdel Jones. Welcome. You are watching AAU Conversations with Verdel Jones. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Mr. and Mrs. Roger and Shavonna Johnson. They are the founders of the Whitney E. Johnson Foundation, and they're also the executive producers of AAU Teen Talk TV and AAU Teen Talk Radio. So we would like to thank them. They're also the founders of the AAU Youth Magazine, and AAU stands for All About Us, and that's what it's about here at AAU Teen Talk. So for more information, you can go to their website, which is aaum.com, and be sure to order your youth magazine today. So I just want to jump right in and get started with our topic. But before we do that, I'll introduce who we have in our studio. We have Dana Boylan, and Dana is, she's an assistant district attorney for Nassau County, and she's been with them for 10 years. And currently she's the Director of Community Reentry Initiatives and Youth Development Programming. So we are very excited to have her here to talk about this topic. And we're also excited to have Corey Pegues here as well. Corey is a 20-year veteran of the New York City Police Department. He rose through the ranks in the police department and retired as a top-level executive in that department. Corey is also a new author. His book is set to release in May 2016. And it's called Once a Cop. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So be sure you order that on Amazon.com today. You can pre-order that. So I want to welcome both of them to the show this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, I wanted to jump right in. Before we actually start the discussion, though, I did want to show a graphic that kind of explains the topic that we're going to be talking about. So it's the school-to-prison pipeline, and there's just some statistics on here that I think we should be aware of. School disciplinary policies disproportionately affect Black students. So if you notice on the chart, they make up only 16% of public school enrollment. However, for multiple suspensions, they make up 42% as opposed to their white counterparts at 31%. And they're a smaller fraction of the population of students. They are 3 times as likely to be suspended, and they are 31% likely to in-school arrest. So I just wanted to flash it on the screen so we can get some context and realize that students of color are disproportionately affected by the school-to-prison pipeline. So thank you for the graphic there. We're going to start with Dana, bring her into the conversation, and I want our viewers to kind of get an understanding of what is the school-to-prison pipeline. What does that mean?
Thank you, Verdel. The school-to-prison pipeline is a practice that is occurring nationally, a phenomenon, in school systems and school districts where suspensions, expulsions, and arrests for minor offenses are tools being used to address disciplinary issues that result in students being taken out of the educational environment, taken out of school, and as a result of them not being in the school system or the school environment, they are then propelled into the prison pipeline.
Right.
That 42% that you talked about, research has indicated that it occurs for most black males by the time they're in the 9th grade. And so if they're now taken from the educational environment into the pipeline, they go into that pipeline undereducated. And research has shown that they come out of the prison pipeline similarly undereducated, often without a GED or a high school diploma.
Right, having those skills. So that playing field is not level in those instances, of course. Yeah. So, Corey, as a police officer, how did you kind of see that manifest itself with our youth? Like we know what the statistics are, we know, and we're going to talk about the perception of our students as well. We know that they're disproportionately affected in the school system, but how does that kind of translate when you're talking about a large police force like, the New York City Police Department? How does that manifest itself with youth?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on this show. I've been dying to get on this show. Verdel Speaks. I finally made it, Mama. I made it. I'm here. Okay, listen, this is a very serious problem in a black community, and policing are a very, very vital part to this. Yeah. So you have to make sure, as not only police commanders, all the way down to the lowly police officer, you got to understand, like, police department is the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system, meaning we start the process. So you can have a blanket statement and just start rounding people up, putting them in jail, but once they go to jail, it's going to carry with them for the rest of their lives. So you got to make sure that you have professional, educated police officers that's going to be able to go in to these schools when the school call you in, or assistant principal or principal call you in and say, hey, these 2 kids had a fight. One has a black eye. Now you make a decision. Do you lock the kid up or not? Well, I know New York State law considers a black eye not an injury. So, you have to be educated on this stuff when you're going into these schools. Are you just going to have, again, the blanket statement where we locking everybody up? I never have been an advocate for police in schools, even though I ran a violent precinct. I ran the second most violent precinct in the city, and I had cops assigned to the school because we had a very violent school. But the marching orders were, guys, go in there. I'm expecting you to make sure you go in there and do what's right. If you bring a child in here, child less than 16, obviously a child, you better make sure, because you're going to have to see me. Forget about the arrest number, because once they get into the precinct, I'm going to be talking to you. And that's what you need, that leadership. That's what it's about. Because the marching orders and policing is top down. It's not bottom up. It's top down.
Right. Thank you. One of the things that I was listening to, I know you have a new YouTube show, and I was listening to it. And the thing that I really like about what you're doing is you're giving individuals an inside view of what really goes on. And that's enlightening, because a lot of times we think that it's a certain, we think something totally different than what it actually is. So I love that you bring that perspective, to the discussion. Dane, I just wanted to ask you quickly in reference to, that school to prison pipeline. What are some contributing factors to the system? Like, why does the system even exist? I know there's some historical data about it, but from your perspective, what or factual, how did it come about?
It would appear that this sort of phenomenon occurred in sort of like the post-Columbine era. Yeah. So it was a reaction to what happened in Columbine, and it sort of manifests itself by school districts taking on this approach that they have a zero tolerance to what would normally have been addressed in the past by the principals or the administrators or getting parental involvement, the community. Yeah. It is now being taken out of that space and taking it into the law enforcement space. And it's sort of a hyper reaction to Columbine, because in preparing for our conversation today, the research that I've come across indicates that, number one, Columbine, when it occurred, it had law enforcement in the building.
Really?
Yes. So
Interesting.
Increased police presence, it begs the question of whether or not it's effective or necessary.
Wow, that's interesting.
And then there are statistics out there that are arguable, but they do exist that indicate that it does not deter the behaviors that we're seeing in students that would result in the need to have police officers in the schools. Now, I'm not suggesting that they don't need to be there, as the gentleman has indicated. You know, when you're in certain schools, there might be a need for presence. However, are they trained?
Right.
How, are they trained to deal with teenagers? Teenagers are a subset of our population with very unique issues and concerns, particularly developmental issues.
Yes.
Are they trained to deal with teenagers as they go through the changes that we know teenagers go through?
Right.
And I would argue that many are not, as we saw in South Carolina.
Right. And we're going to talk about South Carolina also, but before, I'm just going to jump to Corey in reference to the training. You know, I know that you often talk about training and how the New York City Police Department, for example, has the training. They're able to, you know, roll out training programs and all of that, but a lot of times it may be the perception. And we're going to, when we talk about South Carolina, we're going to talk about that perception. But what is the training for, you know, police officers that work with students or in schools? Is there a training process, or do they know how to deal with adolescents? They're very different people. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you have to understand that policing, first of all, police actually consider, they're a host of professions. They're doctors. When you get injured, you got to come fix them. They're domestic violence officers when, you know, it's a domestic incident. They're psychiatrists, psychologists. And this training is only like 6 months. Some departments is 3 months. These people go to schools and get master's degrees, and the cops get this information in a short span of time. That's why what really makes police officers great, and I keep preaching, is cops with common sense. So the training is actually minimal.
Okay.
The training is minimal. Common sense is what comes into play a lot of the time with these police officers. Yeah, they get a little bit of training on how to deal with situations such as, you know, disabled child or out of control kid, but it's not on a level of somebody that's trained. You got to think about when you go into these psych wards, these men and women are there with these people that's mentally disabled, and they're restraining them without a gun. It's just verbal. It's verbal judo. That's what they're using. And cops, they're not using verbal judo. They go right from 0 to 100. You don't want to listen to me? Boom. I got you. And that's what we have to make sure we hold these cops' feet to the fire, because you can't just use your weapon. I would really like in Britain, they don't have no guns. The cops don't have no guns. And they don't have a lot of crime. People pull guns out on the cops that don't have guns, and they disarm them. Like, it's not rocket science to figure this stuff out. And a lot of policing is really talking to people and having common sense. That's what it is.
Right. You know, it's so it's having that common sense. But I want to talk about South Carolina, because it's the perception also. It's the perception of our students, especially students of color. You know, for things that our young black male students would do, you know, that may be seen as normal behavior, for some other students is not considered normal behavior for them. So, and females, you know, with our young women, it's the same thing. So it's that perception, I think, of our students. So when you have a police officer that's policing in South Carolina that actually attacks this young woman, it's the perception, you know. And, you know, so let's just get right into it. I mean, from your perspective, as far as, you know, being, you know, an assistant district attorney and working with youth in particular, what was the reaction from, you know, from that incident?
Oh, I think that people are shocked, appalled. I think if you're a parent, it's hard to reconcile what you saw on that film with what, you know, you are there to do. The fact is, it may very well be that a police officer is necessary in that school. It may very well be that a police presence is necessary. I question why it's necessary in the classroom.
Right.
I actually think it has a chilling effect on the educational process to have a police officer literally sitting in the classroom as you attempt to learn
Right.
in an environment where
Intimidating.
you are
Yeah.
there not just for academic growth, but really if we're doing it well, it's for other types of development.
Right.
How do you interact with your peers? How do you interact with authority? How do you learn how to be mindful of other people when you are on a cell phone and there's a rule that says you shouldn't
Right,
be
you
on
shouldn't
the
be on
cell
it.
phone? What are the school districts? So we talked about the police and training, but what resources are the school districts putting in place to help develop our teenagers beyond academics? It's absolutely needed. So the reaction is like everyone else. We're appalled and shocked. And on top of it, I think you have no choice but, and if I were a police officer, I would like to think I would be asking that of myself. Is this how I would like my child
To be
treated?
treated. Right. Right.
What would I do if my kid
Right, and
did this?
it seems as if, you know, that situation. Now, I don't know. I wasn't in the classroom. I don't know exactly, you know, what happened, but I did see what happened in the end, and the violent nature in which this police officer engaged her. So it does beg the question: what were the administrators in that school district or in that school doing? Were there mental health professionals to work with the child who may have had some issues? And Corey, from your perspective, if you know, from this police officer, what would have been a better course of action for them to take?
Yeah, well, first let me just say I had two reactions when I saw that. One, I was ashamed to have been a police officer, and anytime any of these incidents happen around the country, you know, as a cop, you feel, as a good cop, I must point out, if you're a good cop, you're ashamed at all of these incidents that pop up. And my second reaction was I was an angry black father, because if that was my child, it might have been a problem.
Right.
So I'm getting some bad feedback on here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We just hear a little commercial in the background. I don't know what that was.
All right. So should I continue?
Yeah, we're gonna. You know what? We're gonna have Dana pick that up. Just, you know, before we'll try to get Corey back. But we were talking about that perception of our students of color.
Okay, it's gone.
Okay. Well, let me just ask this question: How have you seen that in the legal system with our students, in that perception of our students, and how are they treated differently? Are they more targeted, I would say?
Well, for the work I do, I don't really see a lot of students.
Okay.
You know, we at the DA's office interact with the youth in a different space, mentoring and youth and outreach and gang outreach. So I can't, you know, I don't think I can speak to the issue of them being treated differently. What I will say is this: I think that there are many police officers who are great police officers.
Right.
And to the extent that there are police officers out there that display what we saw in South Carolina or have seen in other spaces, obviously there's some work to be done.
Right.
But I don't think I can comfortably talk about students being treated, you know, inappropriately or poorly in the legal system, because I don't work directly with them. With students who are in the legal system. Where you would find that maybe family court.
Okay.
Because that's where someone who, in New York anyway, someone who's underage for certain types of crime, particularly the petty crimes that we're seeing in the school district,
right,
that's where they would end up in a family court environment.
Which is good news in the sense that it's not at a higher level, it's within the family court.
Right.
And I know that, you know, within New York, that with our youth, we are trying to not treat them as adults, so to speak, when there's minor offenses such as that, like the PINS diversion is something that's a little bit different than it used to be, because we're trying to prevent what's going on with our students.
And I think here in Nassau County also what we've seen or what we do have in place is our youth court. So
Right.
our office
Yes.
has a youth court that has been lauded statewide.
Mm-hmm.
Other jurisdictions are looking at our youth court as a model.
Right.
And what happens when the youth come to our youth court because they have an offense that brings them there, as opposed to family court,
Right.
they end up getting services and resources that are needed,
Okay.
and they're treated as youth.
Right.
You committed an offense. We are not going to penalize you in a way that doesn't allow you to start over.
Right.
Many cases are resolved with a dismissal and with support systems,
Right.
social workers, and a support system that allows them to grow
Right.
in their cognizance about their behavior and get them out of the system as quickly as possible.
Right. And with, Corey, we're going to just pick up from where you left off in reference to your reaction to what happened in South Carolina. We were just speaking about the youth court that actually,
Right.
where they have their peers, I think, try the cases, so to speak, right?
Absolutely.
But I just want to go back to, because you were talking about your reaction to what was going on in South Carolina, and I just want to make sure that we get that into the conversation.
Right. Like I said, for the listeners, you can follow me on my YouTube channel, C Pegues, CPEGUES. I put up a video about the whole South Carolina incident, and if that was me, I would have actually talked to the child. I don't know how long they had a conversation,
Right.
but once you came to the point where you thought that you was going to have to physically remove her, he should have removed all the other kids out of the classroom, including the teacher and administrator, everybody out of the class, because that's how you disarm them. That's how you take away the power. So young girl, her feelings are hurt. She feel like this cop is getting ready to do something to her. It's all the machismo, whatever you want to call it. That's all that was. This was a simple case. Remove
Right.
all the other kids out, close the door, and you can let her know, listen, you're coming with me, you're getting suspended, however long it's going to take. And now you call in, like you said, trained professionals. They got to have somebody in their school district. And so the listeners know that municipality where this happened, every single school has a cop assigned to it. I don't know what their crime rate is, but
Okay.
every single school has a resource officer, which
Right.
I'm not so much into it, but their argument is they're bringing cops in there so people can get comfortable with police, and they're doing things with the police. But when you do this is what happens.
Right.
That incident happens. And in all of these incidents, when you look at the track record, all of these cops got baggage.
Right.
Here's a cop who already was being sued.
Yeah.
Here's a cop that had a pending case coming up. He was, lifting 600 pounds. Olympic guys don't deadlift 600 pounds. Like, this guy's on steroids. Like, come on, like, what are
Right.
we doing here? Cops have to be vetted, especially when you're dealing with our most precious children,
commodities.
our children.
Exactly.
You have to make sure you have somebody in there that's able to talk. And they gave him cop of the year a month, about a year before that. He was cop of the year. I wonder what he did. He probably broke 2 people's arms. I don't know what he did to earn
Wow.
that.
That's unbelievable. But
I found myself asking the question, what processes are in place for police officers that are in the schools? Clearly, there are situations in schools where it's necessary. There's no question about that. As a parent, I certainly would not want my child in a district or a school environment where they're open up to the potential of being harmed because maybe there is a history or a track record of kids coming in with guns and knives and things like that.
Right.
So I think it would be inappropriate or even short-sighted for us to say police presence isn't needed. However, what practices are in place to deal with certain issues?
Right.
If you're not dealing with a child possessing a gun or a child possessing a knife,
right.
what is appropriate behavior or reaction to certain situations? In addition to what Corey said, why not let the class finish, let the educational process complete itself,
Right.
and let the school administrators at some point afterwards say, listen, tomorrow you will not be able to return to this classroom with a cell phone.
Right.
That's right.
Okay? Tomorrow you will come in with your parents and we will make some decisions about what is going to be accepted behavior going forward.
Right. And and the other thing is, key, what you said, let the educational process in that classroom continue. So it's a lot of different layers to this because they are stopping the education of these children when they really didn't have to. So what is that saying about educating our children as well?
I mean, no life was at risk.
People,
You know,
I think people are misguided in America. You have to understand, police officer job is to lock people up.
right,
That's
right,
what we do.
Right.
So you calling the cops, there's a high propensity that somebody's leaving with bracelets on.
right. Well,
Don't call us to just like fix stuff. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, we're looking to lock people up. And that cop, that's exactly what he did. He went from 0 to 100. A lot of times, we escalate as opposed to de-escalate.
Right.
We escalate step by step.
Right.
He didn't go step by step to lock up.
Right.
He went
Corey,
right to lock up.
Corey, we're going to stop. I know we have a lot of information and we're flowing here, but we have to wrap up this segment. Again, we were talking about the school to prison pipeline. For those of you who are watching, on the internet, we're going to continue our conversation. However, I want to thank everyone else for watching. There's going to be a part 2 to this show as well, because once we figure out what the school to prison pipeline is, we want to talk about some solutions, some strategies, some interventions to help our youth. So thank you for watching Conversations with Verdel Jones.